But there's more to it. International supermodel Bella Hadid, a frequent vocal critic, we should mention, of Israel. Well, she apparently saw those comments of Minister Ben-Gvir as well and posted online to her nearly 60 million followers, responding that, quote, in no place, no time, especially in 2023, should one life be more valuable than another's, especially simply because of their ethnicity, culture, or pure hatred, close quote. Now, Itamar Ben-Gvir appeared to react to Hadid and did attempt to clarify his earlier remarks.
I said yesterday on a TV broadcast that the right of Jews to live and not to be murdered in terror attacks prevails over the right of Arabs in Judea and Samaria to travel on the roads without security restrictions. This is why checkpoints should be placed on roads where irregular terrorism and shooting by jihadists are committed against Jews. But the Israeli radical left selectively cut a section out of my statement, purposefully misquoted even that, and removed the context in order to slander me, as if I had made a racist declaration that Jews deserve more civil rights than Arabs. This is exactly how the left continues to fan the flames of incitement in the world against the Israeli government.
Now we're joined by Michael Kleiner, the president of the Likud Supreme Court, and Dr. Dalia Shenlin, political analyst and columnist for Haaretz. So thank you both for being with us here. Some things to discuss. I want to just start out by saying, look, we've seen many of the main roads in recent months even utilized by terrorists to shoot, and run, drive-bys, as we call them. Thus, it seems sensible to ramp up security checkpoints on the roads from a certain standpoint. But it's also seen, I think, by others as a backslide for, Israeli-Palestinian interaction at large. At worst, collective punishment, at best, a desperate tactic to stop terrorists. Dr. Shenlin, to come to you first, what is happening in this chapter? What do you see?
Well, the question is whether we're talking about policies or the minister's statements. I think the minister, for one thing, very accurately described not only Israel's current policy, but many years of Israeli policy, which frankly prioritizes the right of Israeli Jews to move around anywhere, and Israeli citizens in general, over the rights of Palestinians. Of course, he didn't use the word Palestinian. Now, I don't want to minimize the security threat, but by the very same logic, we could also say that settlements in the West Bank have been used as launching pads for the pogrom in Harara. There is a major conflict in the region. It's a security conflict because it is a 56-year Israeli hostile military occupation that privileges Israeli rights over Palestinians, and it's not ever going to be resolved by ramping up security measures as much as they may be. There may be security measures that are needed, but it's very hard, I think, for this Israeli government to make the case that those kinds of measures really are about security. As you point out, the accusation of collective punishment is not just an accusation, it's real. Every single Palestinian is affected by restrictions on freedom of movement. And one of the interesting things we've seen recently is that when Israel now wants to join the American visa waiver program, it summarily rescinded many of the kinds of restrictions that it had considered security restrictions for up to 60,000 Palestinians who are now allowed into Israel to travel through Ben-Gvir Airport. How are we supposed to take those kinds of collective restrictions seriously from a security perspective?
I'm going to bring Michael Kleiner into this. Mr. Kleiner, look, in defense of the words here, as Dr. Shenlin is saying, look, aside from ramping up security forces' presence, their activity in the West Bank here, as men, women, and children are being targeted on the roads out there, what other options are there for this current government? Is it a problem of optics for this government, or is there some real, strategic and policy issue for them?
No, it's only a security issue. And everybody who says otherwise is not sincere or is trying to play dumb. The minister was very clear to say that life of people is more important than freedom of transportation. And if somebody will travel an additional 10 kilometers to reach one point from another, and this will save some lives, and this is a price worthwhile to say. On the same breath, you can give an opposite example. There is a discrimination between Israeli Jews and Arab Israelis and Jewish Israelis regarding the freedom of movement in Judea and Samaria. If an Israeli Jew will go into Jenin, he will be punished and go to jail because he's risking his life. If an Israeli Arab goes to Jenin, it's okay. Because why? Because the consideration of danger is that Israeli Arabs are not in danger in Jenin, and Jewish and Israeli Jews are in danger. Same way in the roads. we all the time reopen the main roads to the Palestinians, and it's only coming into question after a terror act. And Ben-Gvir made his declaration very soon after a school teacher was murdered alongside the daughter, together with the driver. And because some Arabs who use the road use it to shoot at Israelis. Nobody believes that Ben-Gvir would have made a similar declaration if there would have been no murders and if there would have been no terror acts on those roads on behalf of Palestinians. And it will be stopped the moment the terror will stop. This freedom of movement for all will be accepted. On the other hand, to make sure and make it easy for the Palestinians, we always try to open it again. And when terror becomes more dangerous, we stop the road. We stop the road to save lives. And what the minister said, that saving lives and traveling without danger to your life is more important than just traveling and not using an alternative road.
I want to bring back Dr. Shenlin into this. Look, Dr. Shenlin, look, many critics obviously emerging, it's not so much on the security policies, but on what Minister Ben-Gvir seems to be doing. Enormous diplomatic damage unnecessarily at times, responding to popular figures on social media, Ben Hadid in this case, doing more harm than good sometimes, this minister?
Doing more harm than good. Sorry, are you asking me or are you asking
I'm asking Dr. Shenlin. Dr. Shenlin, is he doing more harm in even interacting in a media level?
In that case, I will be happy to answer. First of all, he was asking me. Thank you. For one thing, let me just explain. This is really not only about security. There's a fundamental difference between Palestinians and Israelis, Jews or Arabs, in the West Bank. For one thing, Israel is not the sovereign in the West Bank. Palestinians live there and they are under Israeli military law. They need permits. This affects every single Palestinian 100%, whether they're in the West Bank, Gaza, and no Israeli needs any permission to go anywhere. I myself have gone into Ramallah, have gone into Nablus as an Israeli Jew. When I'm not going as a settler, I've never been arrested, and not going as a settler, there's very little danger if you go in solidarity with Palestinians.
In fairness, there are big red signs at the entrance to Palestinian cities. It's illegal for Israeli citizens to go into these areas. That is one of the military policies out there.
Yeah, but in reality, you know who goes in there? In reality, you know who goes in there all the time? The Israeli army. And so I think that's the fundamental imbalance. And no Israeli needs a permit to do anything, whereas Palestinians live under a permanent permit regime. It's impossible to say it's all about security because it's so much about Israel expropriating land and resources to build settlements. So that's one thing we have to understand about the bigger picture. It's very convenient to ignore it when there's one attack. But if we're looking at one attack, why not look at all attacks? Now, in terms of Ben-Gvir, frankly, I am a little bit surprised by the surprise of outside interlocutors from the liberal camp or from the American government, because they see this as a matter of rhetoric, when in fact, as I've pointed out, it is an accurate description of Israel's policy with relation to the ability to physically move, which has always privileged Israeli Jews over Palestinians.
Look, Prime Minister Netanyahu, and for you, Dr. Shenlin, I want to stay with you on this. Prime Minister Netanyahu
in the West Bank and Gaza live under a movement regime.
Look, I want to bring Prime Minister Netanyahu into the picture, Dr. Shenlin. He did not appear to condemn any of the recent comments, or really even chime in, as far as I've caught, to these, this list of comments by the Minister Ben-Gvir. Should he have? Should he be part of, as the world's looking in, condemning this, arguments taking place? Should the Prime Minister be in the mix?
He could condemn this, but then it would simply look hypocritical. I mean, he's the reason why Ben-Gvir is in such a prominent position in this government anyway. Ben-Gvir wasn't even able to enter the Knesset in recent elections until Netanyahu worked very hard to push him together with Bezalel Smotrich's religious Zionism party so that they would pass the threshold and win 14 seats and thereby become key coalition partners. And now he is the Minister of National Security. If Netanyahu were to condemn his actions, his statements, of course he could do that, but he would look, frankly, extremely hypocritical. This is a government that Netanyahu built.
Michael Kleiner, on that topic, on the role of Prime Minister Netanyahu or not, when it comes to Minister Ben-Gvir and the international uproar he's creating.
First of all, it's a nonsense, because not Netanyahu gave 14 seats to the party of Otzma Yehudit. The Israeli public gave it in election. And the fact that it was the only coalition option for Netanyahu is not Netanyahu to blame, but Gantz and Lapid, who didn't want to join the national unity government. They are to blame that this is the only option that was left to Netanyahu. But I must say that if Bar-Lev would have been the previous Minister of National Security, would have been minister, nobody would have suspected him, and they ran the same policy, which is intended to the welfare of the Palestinian population. And if Jewish settlements are built near an Arab village, it usually improves the village. It gives them job, it improves their economy, it gives them better health services, and Mr. Zachalke, who was a member of Knesset from the Communist Party in Israel, said that the difference between the right and left in Israel, that when the left was building settlements, it was instead of Arab villages, and when Israelis and the Likud government build settlements in Judea and Samaria, is alongside villages and helping them along better roads, better economy, as I said. And I believe the policy of the government is not to alienate the Arab population, but on the contrary, to improve the standard of living. Much is done in it. And in the moment the incitement in the school books of the Palestinian Authority will stop, and the Palestinian Authority will stop paying terrorists to try to kill Jews, it will improve the situation. And the moment there will be no terror cells in Jenin, the Israeli army will never go into Jenin. They have nothing to do there unless there are terrorist cells that are to be handled and treated.
Look, Dr. Shenlin, I want to bring you in here. We have about a minute, a little over a minute left here. And if you have any response you want to make.
The idea that the Israeli government or the Minister of National Security is interested in Palestinian welfare is simply disingenuous. He purposely renamed his position the Minister of National Security rather than the Minister of Internal Security because, as Israel has defined in its basic laws, its quasi-constitutional laws, there is only one nation, according to Israeli law, between the river and the sea, and that's the Jewish nation, and that is who Minister Ben-Gvir certainly intends to serve. The idea that Palestinians do better when there are settlements, funny, I don't think most Palestinians would agree with you, and I think it's frankly very dismissive of the reality that Palestinians have been denied self-determination for the last 56 years, and certainly since the beginning of Israeli statehood. There's never any way to replace national self-determination with paid prizes like paving a road, especially when most Palestinians either aren't allowed to use them or live under a permanent permit regime that can give or take their right to use them. Until they are living as free citizens, you will never have the kind of security that Israel wants. Not that I think any country enjoys perfect security anywhere. I think usually it's simply being used as an excuse to make sure that Palestinians do not achieve independent statehood and that Israel effectively annexes the West Bank, which it is doing on the ground already.
Certainly a lot of optics on this government, suspicions on that. Michael Kleiner, Dr. Dalia Shenlin, we're out of time for this debate. Appreciate you both joining us. Tough topics that we like to take on here, so thank you both for contributing to that.